Good morning. Good morning. Okay. You are out there. Excellent. Welcome. This is a very exciting day for us here at the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Greater Naples because our religious education, our students are back with us today, and they've joined us in the sanctuary over on this side this year since our piano is over here. So let's welcome them into our sanctuary. Welcome. It is great to see you here this morning. The Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Greater Naples is a welcoming congregation freely seeking intellectual and spiritual growth. We strive to create a wider community of peace, justice, and love. And if you want to see what I just said, it's right there on the front of your order of service. It is our mission statement, and it's what we try to live by through all the programs of our congregation. We're very happy to have anyone who's with us here for the first time. We urge you to join us for refreshments and conversation after the service. You go through the back doors, through the hospitality area, pick up some food and beverage, and join us on the patio or wherever, and meet a few people that hopefully will be eager to meet you. The blue sheet that you had the opportunity to take at the front entrance is our weekly news, and it tells all the things that are going on in the congregation this week. As I mentioned last week, things are jumping. Things are sort of being added to the list. This week, the first notice for Beyond Sunday, our Wednesday evening all-church activities, begins not as our newsletter said on the 23rd of September, but instead on October 7th. So October 7th is the start date. We'll go every 2 weeks. Look for more information about that both in this sheet and in the newsletter, and we'll also be announcing things from the pulpit as well. Please know that there are hearing devices for anyone that has some trouble hearing. There are a few copies of the sermon available. I think they're probably all grabbed by now. But if you need any assistance with hearing, please raise your hand and someone will bring you a device. If you have a device already, an electronic device that you use to communicate with the outside world, I hope you'll turn that to a more reverent setting right now as we begin our morning's worship together. We pause at the edge of a new church year and catch our breath. Let us bring our attention into this room, to this group of people and this moment. We bring a myriad of talents, ideas, needs, and styles. Yet within this diversity, there is a common bond between us. We love this fellowship, and we are willing to work together to improve and strengthen this community of ours. We know that how we go about doing that is as important as what we do together. That creating a larger community of peace, justice, and love requires an intentionality to be first in right relation with one another. And so with this intentionality in mind, let us join in the chalice lighting words printed in your order of service while Emma lights our chalice this morning. In the light of truth, the warmth of community, the fire of commitment, we gather this day. May the flame we now kindle be to us a symbol of the unity we seek. And let's join together in song, rising in body or spirit, and joining our voices together and singing hymn number 361, Enter, Rejoice, and Come In.
Morning. I am Heather. I'm the Director of Religious Exploration, as we're calling it now. And I'm going to invite all of our young people, youth, children, come on up. And this magic thing happened. There's 7 empty seats right up here. So the first 7 of you up here get good seats, right in the big adult seats. And there's a bunch of carpets here that you're also welcome to grab. There's some more seats on that side, too. I know there's some people that are still on vacation. So we're trickling in, but it's great to see you all.
Just come on forward. The carpets look more... My microphone's kicking out here. Let's start. Good morning. Hello. Today we're going to talk about our chalice, this beautiful ceramic bowl in the light that's also represented on our pulpit here. The chalice is the symbol of Unitarian Universalism, but it was not always so. In fact, it hasn't been the symbol. It's only been the symbol since 1976. But there's a long history to this. In fact, 75 years ago today. Nobody was born 75 years ago today, I know. not 75 years ago today, but 75 years ago this year, this symbol came into being as the symbol of the Unitarian Service Committee. Now, the Service Committee was a very interesting group of people who went over to Europe to help people who needed assistance, Jews, Unitarians, and other people who were fleeing persecution in other parts of Europe. And the Service Committee served to help those people find a way out of the lands in which they were being persecuted. And they needed a symbol to show, like the Red Cross, they needed a symbol to show the idea of hope and possibility. And so they hired somebody named Hans Deutsch to design this symbol. And the symbol for them had the eternal flame that all religions sort of had in their arsenal of symbols, but it also served as a symbol of hope and possibility. The Unitarians actually did something very sneaky. They created false documents with this symbol on it, hoping that Jews and Unitarians could carry these documents with this interesting-looking official symbol and have them pass as official documents. If they were carrying documents that said they were Jews or Unitarians or other people who were being persecuted, they could be arrested and taken away. But if they had some symbol in their document that looked relatively interesting and official, perhaps they could sneak through. Of course, the members of the Service Committee also did some very brave things in helping people escape that persecution in Europe. Well, that was the symbol, became the symbol of the Unitarian Service Committee, and it has been from the beginning, from 75 years. But when the Unitarians and the Universalists merged, the Universalists had a symbol, the one on the left, the circle with a cross in the lower right-hand corner there. But the Unitarians actually didn't have a symbol. And so when they finally agreed that they needed a symbol much later, 1976, they decided to use the Service Committee's logo and merge the two into what we have today. So Heather's going to tell you the rest of the story.
I have one question for Tony first. So Tony, when you were young, like they are, if you can remember that far ago, right? Tell us, did you do this every day when you came? No. So this was something that was new, and churches didn't necessarily do this. But let me ask you, where do you think in churches they started to use that chalice and light that whenever they gathered? Do you think it was in the sanctuary? It wasn't. Where else might it have been that the use of flaming chalice happened in churches across this country in the 70s? Who do you think might have done it? Like a lot of great things, it started where? In the back of the church, in the RE classrooms. It was the teachers and the students who started lighting it every Sunday, and gradually it became something that they did in service over time. So that's really exciting for you to know that you were the kind of people that started that, the young people. So the flaming chalice is something that we use in a lot of churches, that we light each Sunday, but it actually has a representation far beyond it. And different people think it's different things, and I'm going to share a couple things with you that it could represent. So the chalice is a cup, and a cup can be full or it can be empty, just like us. Sometimes we're full, sometimes we're empty. It also has the flame. Now, the flame isn't really an object. It's something that's dynamic. Does anyone know what that means? That's kind of a big word. Dynamic. Anyone? Rachel? Loud and soft. Rachel's a piano player. Her teacher is here. That's exactly, it's something that changes. Sometimes it's one thing, sometimes it's another. So as you look at that flame, it changes, just like each of us change. Now, there are three things that are important for that flame. It needs three things, just like we do. It needs fuel so that it can burn. And in our congregation, the fuel that we have is our buildings and our books and our money and our documents. All those things are important. We need those in our community. The other thing that flame needs is a spark, some heat, just like each of us do. And inside of each of you, there's a little spark. And when we come together and do activities in our community, that's the warmth and the heat that we generate here together. And when we use our hearts and our minds, that helps us. The third thing that flame needs, can anyone tell me what the third thing, any scientists here? What else does it need? It needs air. That's right, James. It needs air. Just like we all do, because the most important thing each and every one of us does every day is what? Breathe. And how we breathe really matters, and that's something that we're going to explore a little bit back in RE this year about how we're breathing. So that is the air that we need. We need fuel, we need heat, we need air. Now, this is a living flame, and what does that mean? It means we have to relight it every single day in our lives and in our congregations. And the way we overcome the darkness that is out there, just like they did during World War II when Jews and Unitarians were being persecuted, is by lighting that chalice and by letting that be one of our symbols. Now, even though that's the official symbol of the UUSC, the Service Committee, and the UUA, and it's the focus of a lot of our worship, and also in many churches it's the logo, there isn't just one interpretation of what it means. That's the really exciting, cool thing here. That like our faith, the flaming chalice is open to lots of different truths. So I hope this year you will ask yourself continually, what does that flaming chalice mean to me? And we'll be sharing that and talking about this year because that can change and it can be different for all of us, and that's the beauty of our faith. So think about that. What does the flaming chalice mean to you? And with that, Emma's going to take our RE chalice.
And we're going to sing the children out by singing number 112 in the Gray Hymnal as we also deepen into a time of meditation. Do you hear? Number 112. You can remain seated as the children leave. All the dreams, all the dares, all the sighs, all the prayers. We come into the sanctuary every week with all these things and with more in our hearts. And this is a time that we have the opportunity to share with one another the joys and sorrows of our lives. So let's take a minute of silence to share these thoughts with each other and remember that each of us holds something in our hearts that may be yearning to get out. I wanted to carve out a little bit of the service this morning to have us sit in quiet solidarity with those in Europe who have left their homelands to seek safety and promise in a new land. The decision to leave behind the place you and maybe your family have called home, a house, the furniture in it, the table where you sit, your village, the familiar sounds and language, faces and smiles, family and friends, must be so hard, even in the face of want and fear. And then to find the journey nearly impossible, the odds stacked against the greed of others ready to take advantage or keep you in limbo or force you on further, or worse, to return to a situation that was not viable to begin with. These are human beings with the same desires that you or I have for the freedom from want and for a life that is, as much as normally possible, safe from harm. As we go through our week this week and pay attention, let us not avert our eyes or shield our hearts, but like the Hungarian people who this week came to the aid of the travelers in Budapest, when our time comes to offer a hand and share what we have, whether it's this week or in some distant time, let us recognize that moment and act without hesitation. The reading this morning speaks to the kind of desperation that the people in Europe are now feeling, but it comes from our own land. At a time 80 years ago that may not be so different from today in some respects. Let America Be America Again was written by Langston Hughes in 1935, and in 1943 it was included in a publication of poetry that was published by the FFL-CIO. Let America be America again. Let it be the dream it used to be. Let it be the pioneer on the plain, seeking a home where he himself is free. America never was America to me. Let America be the dream the dreamers dreamed. Let it be that great, strong land of love where never kings connive nor tyrants scheme, that any man crushed by one above. It never was America to me. Oh, let my land be a land where liberty is crowned with no false patriotic wreath, but opportunity is real and life is free. Equality is in the air we breathe. There's never been equality for me, nor freedom in this homeland of the free. Say, who are you that mumbles in the dark, and who are you that draws your veil across the stars? I am the poor white, fooled and pushed apart. I am the Negro, bearing slavery's scars. I am the red man driven from the land. I am the immigrant, clutching the hope I seek, and finding only the same old stupid plan of dog eat dog, of mighty crush the weak. I am the young man, full of strength and hope, tangled in that ancient, endless chain of profit, power, gain, and grab the land, of grab the gold, of grab the ways of satisfying need, of work the men, of take the pay, of owning everything for one's own greed. I am the farmer, bondsman to the soil. I am the worker, sold to the machine. I am the Negro, servant to you all. I am the people, humble, hungry, mean. Hungry yet today despite the dream. Beaten yet today, O pioneers, I am the man who never got ahead, the poorest worker bartered through the years. Yet I'm the one who dreamt our basic dream. In the old world, while still a serf of kings, who dreamt a dream so strong, so brave, so true, and even yet its mighty daring sings in every brick and stone, in every furrow turned, that's made America the land it has become. Oh, I'm the man who sailed those early seas in search of what I meant to be my home. For I'm the one who left dark Ireland's shore and Poland's plain and England's grassy lea, and torn from Africa's strand I come to build a homeland of the free. The free? Who said the free? Not me. Surely not me. The millions on relief today, the millions shot down when we strike, the millions who have nothing for our pay. For all the dreams we've dreamed, for all the songs we've sung, and all the hopes we've held, and all the flags we've hung. The millions who have nothing for our pay except the dream that almost dead today. Oh, let America be America again, the land that never yet has been, and yet must be. The land where every man is free. The land that's mine, the poor man's, Indians, Negroes, me, who made America, whose sweat and blood, whose faith and pain, whose hand at the foundry, whose plow in the rain, must bring back our mighty dream again. Sure, call me any ugly name you choose. The steel of freedom does not stain. For those who live like leeches on the people's lives, we must take back our land again. America. Oh yes, I say it plain. America never was America to me, and yet I swear this oath, America will be. Out of the rack and ruin of our gangster death, the rape and rot of graft and stealth and lies, we, the people, must redeem the land, the mines, the plants, the rivers, the mountains, and the endless plain. All the stretch of these great green states, and make America again. The morning's offering for the ongoing mission of this congregation will be gratefully received. Over the next 4 weeks, we'll be looking at the idea of covenant from a few different angles. At one time or another, most of us have been involved in creating a covenant within our committees here at church, or perhaps among our peers at work. Maybe we've even helped a religious education class find their own rules of how they'd like to conduct themselves in the classroom. Even if you haven't had any direct experience of building a covenant, you are party to one as a member or guest of this congregation, as we have joined together in covenant with other member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association to affirm and promote our 7 principles. You'll find those on the back of your order of service, and acknowledge the sources that we draw upon to build our living tradition. Next week, we'll talk about how our congregational governance structure is rooted in the idea of covenant and our Judeo-Christian heritage. And later this month, we'll get more specific about why we need to develop a covenant of right relations here in our own church. In the middle, we'll explore how other religions have built in times for their adherents to pause and reflect on how they have treated others over the course of a year and what is needed to get back into right relationship with one another. The culmination of all this focus is for us to create on September 27th our own covenant of right relations, to put into words how we intend to walk together in the work we've chosen to create a larger community of peace, justice, and love. It is the third component of an important congregational plan, which includes the mission statement, the vision statement, which we created last year, and this covenant, which helps us find our way to each of those. Today on Labor Day, we'll look at the U.S. Constitution as covenant and what that means in terms of how we as citizens are bound to the goal of equal opportunity for all under the law in order to form a more perfect union. How many of you took a civics course in high school? That's not bad, but it's by no means the majority here. Civics is not a mainline course these days. Even before the passage of No Child Left Behind in 2001, states had started shifting focus away from mandatory civics courses and had dramatically reduced the number of assessments in that area. And although 39 states still require at least one course in American governance or civics as a requirement for graduation, only 8 states administer a standardized test in that area, and only 2 require that the students pass that test. The Center for the Study of the American Dream at Xavier University has found that 1 out of 3 U.S. citizens would fail the civics portion of the immigrant naturalization test. The only civics course I ever took was disguised as something that looked a lot more exciting. It was a year-long course with the juicy name of World Problems. And it was taught by Neil Gray, who was one of those great educators who made whatever he taught interesting by creating curricula that involved hands-on participation and open discussion. Mr. Gray was famous for the expression he would invariably trot out when it began to snow outside the classroom window and students would get excited about maybe an early release or possibly a snow day the next day. Feigning boredom, of which I know he was entirely incapable. He would say, "Nothing a little sand and salt won't cure. Now let's get back to work." In fact, in our class will, we left Mr. Gray a little sand and salt, which was given in affection, but in retrospect we could have just as easily left him the world, which in reality he had opened up for many of us. Appropriate to its name, the course was divided up according to some problem, traditional or immediate, that people had or were facing in the world. And Mr. Gray would assign each student or team a role as we studied, discussed, and played out these problems in the classroom. You could be the leader of the free world for 2 weeks and then find yourself as an unemployed textile worker whose job had gone overseas the following section. Regardless of the role, our assignment was to research and present that perspective in the class. And there was always at least one person assigned to be the press. And their homework each day was to fill out a 8.5 by 11 2-sided newspaper sheet. And the paper was titled The World, and at the bottom, its motto read, "All the news that fits." I say this was a civics course and that we spent the first half of the year studying domestic problems, and in doing so became much more familiar with the structures of government and the critical role of being an engaged citizen. One of the issues we looked at, which was very hot at the time, was segregation. And we did this by looking at the 1954 Supreme Court ruling on Brown versus the Board of Education, which came out of Topeka, Kansas, and paved the way for integration in American public schools. This was Mr. Gray's opportunity to get his 2 cents in on the court and the Constitution. The first thing to remember, he said, is that the United States Constitution is an evolving document. Now that evolution is, as it should be, he said, extremely slow. We don't want the political frenzy of the day or the perennial swing of political power to get codified into our founding document, now do we? But it is nonetheless a document that can be altered and amended to meet the changing needs of a modern society that is now very different from the time in which the founders lived and worked. The second thing you need to know, he said, is that the Constitution is not a detailed code of conduct. It's a very rough blueprint for the structure of our government, and with the amendments, the first 10 representing the Bill of Rights, it presents a fairly concise statement of our national values. The court's job, Mr. Gray said, is to make decisions on cases and controversies that are brought before it. And when those cases have a relevance to the Constitution, they look to ferret out from this blueprint and these statements the relevant point, the point upon which they will justify their decisions. The work of the courts is a critical balance against the people and the other arms of American government. And with that, Mr. Gray assigned us our roles and had us diving into the resources that he had assembled, the biographies and histories and case details, and we were off on our 2-week adventure. Lauren Lomaski, Corey Professor of Political Philosophy, Politics, and Law at the University of Virginia, has written that the Constitution is something of a hybrid between social contract and covenant, and therefore gains some of the advantages of each. Social contract theory advances the idea that in the formation of a progressive state, individuals have consented to surrender some of their freedoms and submit to the state in exchange for protection of the remaining freedoms and rights. As Lomaski says, there are numerous variations on the contract narrative, but in each the state is deemed to be not master, but rather the creation of individual citizens. The implication of contract theory is then that the state is in the service of its citizens and that the bounds of obedience are not without limit. If the state fails to hold up its end of the bargain, then the leaders can be justifiably removed from office. And running through the entire narrative of social contract theory is an implied commitment to the dignity of ordinary human beings. Both John Locke and Jean-Jacques Rousseau, in fact, argued that we gain civil rights in return for accepting the obligation to respect and defend the rights of others. We gain civil rights in return for accepting the obligation to respect and defend the rights of others, giving up some freedoms if necessary to do so. At the time our Constitution was created, social contract theory, as proposed by Enlightenment philosophers, was just that, a hypothetical theory of how a progressive state could possibly come into being. There was no evidence that it could happen, no history that it could happen. But there is no doubt that these theories provided more than just an inspiration to the framers of the United States Constitution. The founders were, though, also equally influenced by the kinds of agreements that constituted the familiar discourse of local government in colonial America: ordinances, codes, compacts, and especially church covenants, remembering that local government and the parish were often synonymous. Though still contractual, a covenant has these qualities. There is a strong mutuality in the agreement. The parties in the covenant are named. The free assent of each party is confirmed. A relationship is established that is ongoing and dynamic. The covenant is held to be in the common interest and incorporates specific commitments from all parties to the larger body. Though the Constitution is remarkable for the fact that it does not invoke the higher authority of God, it is a very secular document of which we are grateful, especially given the time it was written. Its preamble reads like a covenant. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States of America. This speaks to a dynamic relationship and particular responsibilities that the people have with each other and over time. And while we, the people, may seem a bit broad and not in keeping with the idea that each party to the covenant is named, one can certainly point out that in this case the people were represented by 39 of the most respected and distinguished of their compatriots, arguably the most accomplished assemblage of Americans ever to occupy a room together. In addition, the text was then taken back to the individual states for ratification and discussed at length, and in the opinion of Laurent Lemaski, at a higher level of sophistication than political discourse has ever subsequently been afforded in the United States. As citizens under the Constitution, it is our obligation to respect and defend the rights of others. And thus, when we see inequities in the distribution of rights and freedoms among our fellow citizens, we, no less than our government, are called to act. We do this by exercising our right to vote and by lobbying our local and national representatives and government to respond to the perceived needs that we see around us. They, too, have a responsibility. As William Forbath, Lloyd Benson Chair in Law and Professor of History at the University of Texas in Austin, writes, "The Constitution promises real equality of opportunity. It calls on all three branches of the national government to ensure that all Americans enjoy a decent education and livelihood, a chance to engage in the affairs of their communities and the larger society, and a chance to do something that has value in their own eyes." That's a key part of liberty and equality that America promises to everyone. It means that Congress has not only the authority, but the duty to govern economic and social life, to underwrite these promises. And as my high school class learned from Mr. Gray, the court system has the responsibility of interpreting the Constitution as they respond to cases that are brought before them and ensuring that all the people, including the most vulnerable, enjoy equal protections and treatments under the law. In recent decades, however, there has emerged a school of constitutional thought called originalism that views the Constitution's meanings as fixed at the time of enactment. And the originalist's role then is a quest to determine the meaning of the original statements, the meaning of which cannot change except through formal amendment. This is a deeply conservative approach that can limit the court's response to problems that the founders could not have imagined. Constitutional law should be conservative, but this goes a bit farther. Originalism also appeals to the narrative of a traditional nation that it promises to restore an America dedicated to personal responsibility and limited government, private property, and godliness. This narrative has aroused citizens, lawmakers, and judges to act boldly on its behalf. But as the Langston Hughes poem I read earlier testifies, America really never was America to many of its citizens. Though the poem was written 80 years ago, it reverberates still in our society. According to the most recent census, 46.5 million people in the United States, the largest economy in the world, live below the poverty level, many of them women and children. And even if we were looking into the recent uptick in employment, it is still true that over 10 million people who have work of some kind are classified as working poor, people whose incomes do not meet a baseline for providing adequately for themselves and their family. In my mind, the relevant finding of the Bureau of Labor Statistics are these. First, women more likely than men are likely to be among the working poor. And in addition, Hispanics and blacks continue to be twice as likely as Asians and whites to be in that category. Second point is that the likelihood of being classified as working poor diminishes as workers attain a higher level of education. Over the past week, I found it somewhat remarkable that in two different conversations totally unrelated to this sermon, with people associated in the congregation, individuals who I assume are on very different ends of the political spectrum, the thought was shared that education is the great leveler. That if we want to change what is happening in our country, we need to be focusing our attention on educational opportunity. Which brings us back to my high school classroom and Brown versus the Board of Education, and our own education about the importance of the words equal protection of the laws, and how those simple words can promote a nation of the people, by the people, and for the people. What we need is an educational system that fosters diversity, engages it, celebrates it, and sends out into the world students who have learned how to work and love one another. The inequalities and opportunities we face today are complex, and pointing fingers doesn't really do any good to anyone. But as William Forbath states, the kind of gross economic inequality we are experiencing today produces gross political inequality. You can't have a constitutional republic, or what the framers called a republican form of government, and certainly not a constitutional democracy in the context of gross material inequality among its citizens. He expounds 3 reasons for this. It creates the possibility of an oligarchy in which the wealthy rule. It destroys the material independence and security that citizens must have in order to think and act on their own behalf and participate on a roughly equal footing in the polity and society. And it impedes access to the basic goods that are the foundation of dignity and standing in one's own eyes, in the eyes of the community. As subscribers to the covenant that is the Constitution, whether we are of the 1% or the 100%, I believe we have an obligation to work for our fellow citizens who don't enjoy equal opportunity in our current system. The work is in line with at least 5 of our 7 principles. It should not be a partisan effort, but the work of a people who believe in the moral integrity of our people and our nation. So may it be. The 1963 March on Washington, during which Martin Luther King Jr. gave his I Have a Dream speech. The great union leader Walter Reuther, founder of the United Auto Workers, also spoke. In words that could easily be used today, he said, "The cause of freedom is on trial in America, and American democracy is on trial in the eyes of the world. As a nation, we must determine now, once and for all, whether we believe in the United States Constitution, which guarantees the rights of all citizens, whether we are willing to act in the knowledge that all men are free and have the right to exercise the privileges of freedom, whether we are prepared to give practical substance to our noble professions in the belief of the worth and dignity of each individual." Walter Reuther's hope is still the unfinished work of America. The work towards a more perfect union should be ongoing and dynamic. It's good to have Lan Lan back with us, and she will accompany us in our closing hymn, number 113, "Where is Our Holy Church?" Please rise in body or spirit. Go out into the world in peace, have courage, hold on to what is good, return to no person evil for evil, strengthen the faint-hearted, support the weak, help the suffering, honor all beings. Have a wonderful day.